The pyramids weren't built by slaves. Cleopatra lived closer in time to the iPhone than to their construction, and the Sphinx, that eternal guardian staring across the desert, might be thousands of years older than we ever imagined, carved by a civilization we have no record of. Ancient Egypt, 3,000 years of continuous civilization, longer than Rome, Greece, and the entire history of Christianity combined. A culture so advanced they performed brain surgery, built structures we still can't fully explain, and possessed astronomical knowledge that suggests they understood the cosmos in ways we're only now rediscovering. But almost everything you learned about Egypt in school, it's wrong, or at least incomplete. These aren't the myths Egyptians believed. These are the myths we believe about them. And the truth, backed by archaeology, physics, and DNA analysis, is far stranger than any Hollywood movie. Welcome to ancient Egypt, the real one. When we think of ancient Egypt, we see a single continuous culture, unchanging, eternal, mysterious. But that's like treating everything from the fall of Rome to today as one culture. Egypt existed for 3 millennia. The people who built the pyramids were as ancient to Cleopatra as Cleopatra is to us. Imagine trying to understand modern America using only records from 1000 BCE. That's what we're doing when we talk about ancient Egypt as if it was one thing. Today, we're examining 10 myths about Egypt, assumptions so embedded in popular culture that even many historians accepted them until recently. From the construction of the pyramids to the race of the pharaohs, from the purpose of hieroglyphs to the age of the Sphinx, modern science keeps revealing that reality was stranger, more sophisticated, and more mysterious than the myths suggested. Some of these revelations come from archaeology, some from physics, some from DNA analysis and geological dating, and some remain deeply contested, sitting at the edge of what science can prove and what evidence suggests. Ancient Egypt wasn't just the cradle of civilization. It might be the key to understanding what sophisticated civilizations look like and what they leave behind when they fall. Let's separate the myths from the mysteries. Myth number 1. Slaves built the pyramids. Myth. The pyramids were built by Hebrew slaves, whipped and forced to drag massive stones until they died. Reality. The pyramids were built by skilled Egyptian workers who were paid, fed well, and given proper burials, and we have their payroll records. This myth comes almost entirely from Hollywood and a misreading of the biblical Exodus story, which most historians don't believe happened during pyramid construction, if it happened at all. Archaeological evidence paints a very different picture. In the 1990s, archaeologists discovered the workers' cemetery near the pyramids. The tombs show workers died from construction accidents, received medical care, including limb amputation and trepanation, skull surgery, and were buried with honor near the monuments they built. We've also found payroll records written on papyrus and ostraka, pottery shards. Workers were organized into teams named like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. Yes, actual team names. They were paid in bread, beer, meat, and linen. During work seasons, they were fed from state granaries, better food than most Egyptians normally ate. The math is revealing. Building the Great Pyramid in 20 years requires setting one block every 3 to 5 minutes, 10 hours a day. This demands precision engineering, not desperate slaves. It requires skilled masons who understood leverage, mathematics, and materials science. Recent theories suggest they used internal ramps, copper tools hardened through work hardening techniques, and possibly water-lubricated sleds. Some archaeologists now believe the Nile had a long-lost branch that allowed boats to deliver stones much closer to the pyramids than previously thought, discovered using ground-penetrating radar in 2024. The pyramid builders weren't slaves. They were the ancient world's equivalent of NASA engineers, proud specialists working on a project that would make their civilization immortal. And it worked. We're still talking about them 4,500 years later. Myth number 2. Egyptians were black or white. Myth. Ancient Egyptians were black or white-skinned, and this proves a strong political agenda. Reality. Ancient Egyptians were ancient Egyptians, a diverse population that doesn't fit modern racial categories. This myth is weaponized by everyone from Afrocentrists to white supremacists, each trying to claim Egypt for their narrative. The truth is messier and more interesting. Recent DNA analysis of ancient mummies reveals a complex picture. Ancient Egyptians were indigenous North Africans with genetic connections to the Levant, the Middle East, and sub-Saharan Africa. Their DNA doesn't match any single modern population group. Egypt was an empire spanning 3,000 years and thousands of miles. It encompassed dozens of cultures, ethnicities, and regions. Some pharaohs were Nubian. The 25th dynasty was explicitly from what is now Sudan. Some were Macedonian Greek, the Ptolemaic dynasty. Some were likely Libyan, Asiatic, or mixed heritage. The art is misleading. Egyptian artistic conventions weren't photorealistic, they were symbolic. Men were painted reddish-brown, associated with outdoor work. Women yellow ochre, associated with indoor life. This wasn't skin color, it was iconography. They painted gods different colors too. Osiris green, Ammon blue. Physical anthropology of mummies shows a range of features, some narrow-faced, some broad, some with type A hair texture, some type B or C, some tall, some short. Egypt was cosmopolitan, a Mediterranean-African hybrid civilization that traded with Greece, Mesopotamia, and the African interior. The modern obsession with putting ancient Egypt into racial boxes says more about us than them. They identified by nome, region, occupation, and dynasty, not by modern racial constructs that didn't exist yet. Ancient Egypt teaches us that advanced civilizations aren't racial projects, they're cultural ones. The ethnicity of pyramid builders matters less than the fact that they built pyramids. Myth number 3. Hieroglyphs are primitive pictures. Myth. Hieroglyphs are simple picture writing, primitive symbols representing objects. Reality. Hieroglyphs are one of history's most sophisticated writing systems, combining logographic, phonetic, and determinative. Hieroglyphs aren't primitive, they're complex. Think of them less like emoji and more like if English combined Chinese characters, Arabic script, and mathematical notation into one system. The same symbol can represent an object. A mouth might actually mean a mouth. A sound. A mouth could also mean the sound R. An idea. A mouth could also translate to speech, words, or speaking. A grammatical category, determinative, indicating how to read adjacent symbols. This isn't simplification, it's layered meaning. A single hieroglyphic sentence can convey multiple levels of information simultaneously: literal meaning, phonetic sound, symbolic significance, and grammatical structure. The decipherment story itself is fascinating. For 1400 years, no one could read hieroglyphs. The knowledge died with the last temple priests around 400 CE. Then, in 1799, Napoleon's soldiers found the Rosetta Stone, the same text in Greek, Demotic Egyptian, and hieroglyphs. Jean-François Champollion cracked it in 1822 by recognizing that hieroglyphs were both symbolic and phonetic. But here's what's truly strange. Hieroglyphs remained virtually unchanged for 3,000 years. English evolved dramatically in just 500 years. Compare Shakespeare to modern English, yet hieroglyphs from the Old Kingdom look almost identical to those from the Ptolemaic period 2,500 years later. This wasn't primitive conservatism, it was deliberate preservation of sacred knowledge. Hieroglyphs weren't just writing, they were believed to have magical power. Writing someone's name in hieroglyphs gave it existence in the spiritual realm. Erasing it could destroy a soul. The sophistication of hieroglyphs suggests Egyptians understood that language shapes reality, a concept Western philosophy wouldn't articulate until the 20th century. Myth number 4. The Sphinx is 4,500 years old. Myth. The Great Sphinx was built around 2500 BCE by Pharaoh Khafre alongside the pyramids. Reality. Geological evidence suggests the Sphinx might be thousands of years older, carved when the Sahara was still green. This is where mainstream archaeology and alternative theories collide most dramatically. The consensus dating around 2500 BCE, based on facial similarity to Khafre and proximity to his pyramid. But there's a problem: water erosion. In the 1990s, geologist Robert Schoch examined the Sphinx enclosure and found something puzzling: deep vertical erosion patterns consistent with prolonged rainfall, not wind erosion. The Sahara hasn't had that much rainfall since around 5000 to 7000 BCE, during the African humid period when the region was savanna. If Schoch is right, the Sphinx was carved when Egypt was lush and green, potentially 7,000 to 9,000 years ago, by a pre-dynastic civilization we have no historical record of. Later Egyptians might have just renovated it and claimed it. The mainstream response: the erosion could be from water runoff, not rain. Underground water tables. Sand and wind can cause similar patterns. Dating based on artistic style is more reliable. But the mystery deepens. There's no inscription claiming Khafre built the Sphinx. The earliest mention is from a dream stela placed by Pharaoh Thutmose IV around 1400 BCE, already treating the Sphinx as an ancient mystery that had been buried in sand for unknown centuries. Ancient Egyptian texts call it Hor-em-Akhet, Horus of the horizon. Some legends say it guards a hall of records containing pre-dynastic knowledge. No such hall has been found despite ground-penetrating radar searching. Whether the Sphinx is 4,500 or 9,000 years old, it represents something profound. Civilizations leave monuments that outlast memory. We might be looking at a structure whose builders are as lost to history as we will be 5,000 years from now. Myth number 5. Egyptians believed gods were real. Myth. Ancient Egyptians believed their gods literally existed as physical beings. Reality. Egyptian theology was far more abstract. Their gods were closer to Platonic forms or forces of nature. Western minds shaped by Abrahamic monotheism struggle to understand Egyptian religion. We want to classify it as polytheism, belief in multiple gods as distinct beings, but that's a misunderstanding. Egyptian gods weren't individuals. They were aspects of a unified cosmic order called Ma'at. Think less like Greek gods, distinct personalities with soap opera drama, and more like manifestations of natural principles. Ra isn't a god who is the sun. Ra is the principle of solar energy, kingship, creation, and cyclical rebirth. He can merge with other deities, Ra Atum, Ra Harakti, Amun Ra, because they're not separate beings, but different angles on the same cosmic truth. The Egyptians had a concept called Neteru, roughly translated as gods, but meaning closer to archetypal forces or principles of nature. Different temples emphasized different Neteru, not because they disagreed about which gods existed, but because they focused on different aspects of reality. This becomes explicit in the coffin texts and Book of the Dead. The deceased becomes Osiris, merges with Ra, transforms into various deities. You can't become Zeus in Greek mythology, he's a specific person. But you can embody Osiris, because Osiris is a state of being, death, transformation, rebirth. The priestly class, especially by the New Kingdom, understood this philosophically. Temple walls show gods in animal forms, not because Egyptians thought Thoth was literally an ibis, but because symbolic representation conveys meaning beyond literal depiction. Ancient Egypt had a sophisticated theological philosophy that Western minds flattened into primitive polytheism. They were closer to pantheism or philosophical idealism, concepts that wouldn't be formalized in the West until Spinoza and Hegel. Myth number 6. The pyramids align with Orion's belt. Myth. The 3 Giza pyramids perfectly align with Orion's belt, proving ancient astronomical knowledge and cosmic connections. Reality? They roughly align, but the correlation isn't as precise as popularized, and the significance is debated. Robert Bauval's Orion correlation theory, 1994, captivated millions. The 3 Giza pyramids match the position of Orion's belt stars. The Nile represents the Milky Way, and other pyramids align with other stars. It suggests Giza is a map of the heavens. The theory has problems. The alignment isn't perfect. Critics point out you could draw lines between any 3 pyramids and find some stars that roughly match. The correlation improves if you date it to 10,500 BCE, when Orion was positioned differently due to precession, which contradicts all archaeological dating. But here's what's undeniable. Ancient civilizations understood the cosmos far better than we credit. Stonehenge aligns with solstices, Mayan pyramids track Venus. Egypt fit into this pattern, cultures that saw themselves as microcosms of the cosmic order. Whether the pyramids map Orion exactly or roughly, they represent something profound. Humanity's ancient drive to build monuments connecting earth to sky, mortality to immortality, time to eternity. Now we slowly reveal myth number 7. Tutankhamun was important. Myth. King Tut was a major, powerful pharaoh whose death was mysterious and significant. Reality. Tutankhamun was a minor, short-lived king who died young. He's only famous because his tomb survived intact. Tutankhamun ruled for about 10 years, died at 1819, and accomplished almost nothing politically or militarily. He was a restoration pharaoh, reversing his father Akhenaten's religious revolution, but he didn't even finish that work before dying. He wasn't murdered in an exotic plot. Recent CT scans and DNA analysis reveal he likely died from complications of malaria combined with a broken leg that got infected. He was physically frail, probably from genetic disorders due to royal inbreeding. His parents were full siblings. He himself married his half-sister. The pharaohs who mattered: Thutmose III, Egypt's Napoleon; Ramesses II, builder of Abu Simbel; Hatshepsut, female pharaoh who ruled as male king, had massive temple complexes, extensive records, and shaped Egyptian history for decades. Tut was forgotten. His name was left off later king lists. His tomb was so minor and quickly sealed that tomb robbers barely found it. This obscurity is exactly why it survived. When Howard Carter opened it in 1922, the world was astonished, not because Tut was important, but because we'd never seen an intact pharaonic burial. Every other royal tomb had been looted in antiquity. Suddenly, we could see what pharaoh burials actually looked like: the gold, the craftsmanship, the elaborate death rituals. The curse of the pharaohs myth emerged when several people connected to the discovery died, mostly from natural causes over many years, statistically expected. But it captured imaginations. Tutankhamun teaches us that history remembers who survives, not who mattered. A minor pharaoh with an intact tomb becomes more famous than emperors whose monuments were plundered. It's a reminder: what future civilizations find of us might not represent what was important. It might just be what survived. Myth number 8. Cleopatra was a native Egyptian queen, embodying ancient Egyptian civilization. Reality: Cleopatra was Macedonian Greek, descended from Alexander the Great's general, and possibly the first Ptolemy who bothered learning Egyptian. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, he established Alexandria and left his general Ptolemy I in charge. The Ptolemaic dynasty ruled Egypt for 300 years, but remained culturally Greek. They spoke Greek, they practiced Greek customs, they married their siblings. Greek tradition, though Egyptians also did this. They ran Egypt as a Greek kingdom that happened to be located in Egypt. The native Egyptian population was largely excluded from power. Cleopatra VII was the end of this line. Born around 69 BCE, she was the product of numerous brother-sister marriages. Genetically, she was overwhelmingly Macedonian Greek. But here's what made her extraordinary. She was likely the first Ptolemy to learn Egyptian. Ancient sources credit her with speaking multiple languages, including the Ethiopian tongue, Syrian, Median, and others. She studied Egyptian religion, participated in ceremonies, and presented herself as a pharaoh in the traditional style, something earlier Ptolemies avoided. She wasn't just multilingual, she was multicultural, adapting her identity depending on audience. To Greeks, she was a Hellenistic queen. To Egyptians, she was Isis incarnate. To Romans, she was an exotic foreign power player. Her relationship with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony was as much political alliance as romance. Egypt was wealthy, grain production, strategically located and culturally prestigious. Rome was militarily supreme. The alliance made geopolitical sense. After her death in 30 BCE, Rome annexed Egypt. The Age of Pharaohs, 3,000 years of continuous dynastic rule, ended with a Greek woman who killed herself with an asp rather than be paraded through Rome as a prisoner. Cleopatra represents the end of ancient Egypt, not its height. She was a bridge between ancient and classical worlds, and the last person to embody pharaonic power before it became Roman history. Myth number 9. We know how they built the pyramids. Myth. Archaeologists know exactly how the pyramids were built. It's all solved. Reality. We have theories, evidence, and plausible methods, but no definitive answer, and new discoveries keep changing the models. The Great Pyramid contains 2.3 million stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. It was the tallest structure on Earth for 3,800 years. It's aligned to true north within 1/15th of a degree, more precise than the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, built 4,000 years later. We know Egyptians had copper tools, hardened through work hardening, wooden sledges and lever systems. We've found ancient quarries, tool marks, and papyrus records of work crews. But we don't know exactly how they moved the heaviest blocks, 60+ tons, like the granite beams in the King's Chamber. Lifted stones to heights exceeding 400 feet with only Bronze Age technology. Achieved such precise alignment and symmetry with ancient tools. Cut and fit stones so precisely that mortar was often unnecessary. Blade won't fit between some blocks. The ramp theory has problems. An external ramp long and stable enough to reach the top would require more material than the pyramid itself. Internal ramp theories, Jean-Pierre Houdin's model, are promising but unproven without invasive investigation. The 2024 discovery of an ancient Nile branch flowing much closer to the pyramids changes everything. It explains how massive stones were transported by boat much of the way. But loading, unloading, and final placement still required techniques we're reconstructing. Recent experiments show water-lubricated sledges reduce friction dramatically. Copper tools can cut limestone effectively if you add quartz sand abrasive. Levers and counterweights could lift multi-ton blocks. But the sophistication suggests knowledge we're rediscovering. Material science, physics, engineering, organization. The pyramids weren't brute force. They were precision operations requiring mathematical modeling and project management that wouldn't be matched until the Industrial Revolution. The pyramids remind us, ancient doesn't mean primitive. Lost knowledge isn't lost because it was inferior. Sometimes it's lost because civilizations fall and wisdom doesn't transfer. Myth number 10. Ancient Egypt fell because of decadence. Myth. Ancient Egypt collapsed due to moral decay, decadence, or religious corruption. Reality. Climate change, drought, and systemic economic failure destroyed Bronze Age civilizations, including Egypt. The decline and fall through decadence narrative is Roman propaganda about Rome itself that gets projected onto every fallen civilization. It's moralistic storytelling, not history. Egypt didn't fall once, it collapsed and recovered multiple times. The Old Kingdom fell around 2200 BCE when Nile floods failed for decades. The Middle Kingdom collapsed around 1650 BCE from Hyksos invasion and internal fragmentation. The New Kingdom weakened around 1100 BCE during the Bronze Age collapse. That last one is key. Around 1200 BCE, nearly every major civilization in the Mediterranean collapsed simultaneously. Mycenaean Greece, the Hittite Empire, Ugarit, Troy, and Egyptian power dramatically declined. This wasn't coincidence. Current theories point to climate change causing crop failures, which triggered migrations, sea peoples, economic breakdown, and warfare. Tree ring data, ice cores, and archaeological evidence show severe drought across the eastern Mediterranean. Egypt survived better than most. The Nile provided some buffer, but the interconnected Bronze Age trade system collapsed. Tin for bronze became scarce, cities abandoned, literacy declined. The Mediterranean entered a dark age lasting 300 to 400 years. Egypt limped on, but never regained old or new kingdom heights. By the time Alexander conquered it in 332 BCE, Egypt was a shadow of its former glory, wealthy but politically weak, more important for its grain and prestige than military power. The Ptolemaic period was Egypt's epilogue, a Greek dynasty ruling Egyptian territory, blending cultures but ultimately drifting toward the Roman orbit. When Rome annexed Egypt in 30 BCE, the pharaonic age didn't end from decadence. It ended because the geopolitical center had shifted permanently to Rome. Ancient Egypt teaches us that civilizations don't fall from moral failure. They fall from climate shifts, economic breakdown, and systemic shocks they can't adapt to fast enough. A warning that feels relevant today.
Ancient Egypt wasn't what we thought it was. Not a civilization of slaves and superstition, but skilled workers and sophisticated philosophy. Not racially homogeneous, but cosmopolitan and diverse. Not primitive picture writers, but masters of a complex symbolic language. Not eternal, but cycling through collapse and renewal like every civilization before or since. These 10 myths reveal a pattern. We project our assumptions onto the past. We want Egypt to be mystical and alien, so we invent mysteries where there are explanations. We want it simple, so we flatten complexity into stereotypes. We want it morally instructive, so we create narratives of decline through decadence. But the real Egypt is more interesting. It's a reminder that civilization is fragile, knowledge can be lost, and ancient doesn't mean primitive. The people who built the pyramids understood astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and organizational management that rivaled anything before the Industrial Revolution. And they left us monuments designed to survive when everything else falls, which is exactly what happened. The greatest mystery isn't how they built the pyramids. It's whether our civilization will leave anything behind that lasts 4,500 years. If you want to explore more lost knowledge from ancient civilizations to cosmic mysteries, subscribe to Myths of the Cosmos. Because history isn't what we remember, it's what survives. And the truth is always stranger than the myths we tell about it. Ancient Egypt is gone, but its stones remain, waiting for us to finally understand what they were trying to tell us.